Are you tired of the rigged and flawed video game review system, giving every game an 8 out of 10?
Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is an 8 out of 10. Persona 5 is an 8 out of 10. Warhammer 40k Dawn of War is an 8 out of 10.
Here at Bumpkus Bites, we use a completely objective review scale that covers a sufficient breadth of factors, which results in almost every game getting a completely different but accurate score. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is a mid-tier lasagna. Persona 5 is a classic Japanese breakfast. Warhammer 40k Dawn of War is Massaman curry. We use a science-derived and approved review scale of British boiled beef to Red Lobster garlic cheese biscuits. And today, we're using that scale to review Diablo IV, a game developed in secret by mad scientists to specifically awaken some part of yours truly's brain that never evolved over the past 100,000 years to gain any mental resistance to the pull of number treadmills. We'll start off with story.
The old ruins are clear. Your town should be safe now.
Truly!
Huh? Lilith has been unleashed on the realm of Sanctuary, which is the post-apocalyptic future state of the real world. It's recently been freed from Diablo's grasp, and Lilith doesn't want to let it go, so comes after our character, the Haradrim. She sends all manner of agents to stop us on our quest to do. Diablo's dog and Deckard Cain's daughter show up to help us.
A day will come when the Haradrim stumble. Don't be there when they do.
And together, we save the day, and nothing bad will ever happen in Sanctuary again. So it's a really solid, well-told story that kept me on the edge of my seat from beginning to end.
Is this real?
You came to thank the light.
Huh? I rate Diablo IV story a frustrating dot of berry compote garnish on a fancy dessert plate that obviously should have had a bowl of it on the side. Next is setting. In the first two Diablo games, the setting immersed the player in a dreary, fallen world without hope. Towns and cities were brief respites in an impressive and dark setting that really helped make those games special. Diablo III, perhaps due to its dramatically different art style and lighter tone, didn't really achieve this effect, with the exception of maybe some Reaper of Souls areas, and Diablo IV follows suit. Towns are sprawling, and it does have its share of oppressive areas, but there just isn't enough contrast here to make them effective at conveying any kind of emotion. Some of the writing goes overboard to the point where what is intended as bleakness just comes across as absurdity, like in the side quests where you find a succubus-seduced, cheating husband flayed alive and moaning in pleasure.
Such pain. I must have more.
I get what they're going for, but there's a pretty broad sweet spot in between happy carefree and S&M metal death.
More.
And they're just fully over in the S&M metal death area.
More.
Some of the dungeons have interesting gothic aesthetics or slightly spooky haunted cave vibes. They're enjoyable, though brief, and the documents you pick up in each one don't really do much to add meaningful context. At least, they don't when you have the dialogue muted because you're listening to something more interesting on the side. I rate setting a Kraft American cheese slice. Now for audio. Okay, disclaimer off the bat. Shortly after I started this game, I muted all of the dialogue, but in my defense...
Ah! He bit me!
Fangs in the dark.
Hell if I know.
Peaks of sparks of fire, gales of tides of water.
Enough!
I think the writing and direction are just off here, especially regarding the voices that are clearly people doing the most comical generic Eastern European accents, I guess. Some of the voices are good, of course.
The Father's light can be sought through penitence and faith.
Their path always ends in fire and death.
I just didn't consider it a valuable enough part of the game to ever unmute it after I muted it. The music is serviceable. But I soon muted that too. The sound design is quite good. I don't have a whole lot to say here, but everything sounds as I think it should. And the non-diegetic sounds add a lot to the experience, especially the dopamine-inducing nature of it all. I rate audio. A sesame bun. Visual design and user interface. While there are certainly shortcomings in Diablo 4's user interface, the majority of it is done really well, and you would probably expect as much. Seeing your first legendary, and then your first unique, and then your first mythic unique is quite a special part of each character's run. Each of these moments is an event between the bombastic visual indicators and previously mentioned sound design. As in much of Diablo 4, it's dopamine done right. Most other parts of the user interface are intuitive, but there are a few head scratchers. Upgrading your equipment via timbering and masterworking seems like it takes a few too many clicks. Selling your equipment to vendors has you going through your entire inventory and right-clicking each and every item. This one in particular is baffling, since the blacksmith and the occultist have a salvage all button. Luckily, this doesn't come into play too much, since there are better sources of gold, and you're better off salvaging your gear in most cases anyway. The map is littered with icons, but luckily these can be toggled, a fact which I repeatedly forget as I struggle to look for the nightmare dungeon I just initiated through the sea of icons for the altars of Lilith I've already found, but that's user error. Everything in Diablo 4 is very red, but then again I played Total War Warhammer 3 at launch, a year before this game came out, so I really didn't notice. Notice I haven't talked much about graphics. Graphics and art style aren't significant to me, unless it's egregious, as in an art style that is abrasive, or unless it's unique and obviously carefully considered. Diablo 4 doesn't really fit into either category, going for realism, and it's a big budget game, so it looks fine, and it will probably continue to look fine until there's a major jump in graphical enhancements. I rate Diablo 4's visual design and user interface a thick and crispy onion ring, where the onion comes out of it completely on the very first bite, but you eat the rest of the crunchy bit anyway, because the batter is good. We now come to gameplay, last haven to you degenerate, like lizard-minded fellow Neanderthals out there. If you pride yourself on not playing baby mobile games, and if you often smirk when a friend tells you about their passion, and then say, I wish I had time for that. This punishment was made specifically for you. I, like many anxious millennials, am addicted to caffeine. When I don't get my cup of coffee within 2 hours of waking up, my brain ceases to function. I collapse where I'm standing and everything fades to black. The same thing happens when I don't get my Diablo 4 fix. Okay, it's not quite that bad, but it does sometimes feel like an addiction. The continuous chase of higher levels, higher power numbers, or a mythic unique against the odds is enthralling to a reformed League of Legends loot box gambling addict like myself. And this is the part where I would normally talk about Diablo 4's cheap thrills and the shamelessness of its progression structure and how it's designed to reel you in and not let you go. Except there is substance here. While this game absolutely is a dopamine IV, it's also a good game. Combat can sometimes just be pressing 2 different keys over and over again, but there's no denying it's fun. The build variation, shout out to maxroll.gg, ensures there's something here for every style. Do you want to be up close and personal? Try Flay Barbarian. Want to play an easy PvE League of Legends AD carry? Play any ranged rogue build. Do you want to not play the game at all? Minion Necromancer.
I'm whizzing with the door open, and I love it!
And the process of getting these builds up and running is so satisfying. Sure, your character starts off with the movement speed of a dying snail, but that makes it all the more gratifying when you equip them with your alt's 5 mythic uniques and you start zooming around the map. In addition, you'll level up and get more and more powerful gear along the way. At certain key points, you'll make the jump to higher world tiers. World tiers 3 and 4 come with new tiers of equipment. Equipping a weapon that increases your DPS from 400 to 1200 and seeing how much more damage you do afterward is such a rush. All the while, you're gaining skill points and eventually Paragon points. In fact, let's talk about Paragon points. On the surface, Diablo 4's Paragon system kind of looks like Path of Exile's bewildering skill tree, but it's a little more casual friendly. Your choices aren't quite as numerous, and it guides your choices with legendary nodes and slottable glyphs. Each page of the Paragon board has a specific configuration of stat nodes, including a legendary node with a significant change to the way you play, or how much damage you deal, or how much damage you take. Paragon pages also include a glyph slot where you can equip glyphs you pick up in the world. These glyphs also have a significant effect, usually boosted by gaining a certain amount of a stat and a specific radius around the glyph. While I definitely just look at a Maxwell guide and copy it, I can see the system giving a lot of interesting choices to those who choose to engage with it. The system fuels your power scaling more for the in-game activities, which are what a lot of people play ARPGs for. These are adequately varied in Diablo 4, though I wish there was more to them. There are timed world events like world bosses and wave-based activities you can take on with others out and about in the world, but they stop becoming relevant early on. There's this thing called the Pit, where you kill a bunch of enemies before challenging the boss, which is really just a giant health bar. It drops masterwork materials, a form of in-game equipment upgrade, but the number that it drops compared to the amount of time spent kind of make the activity irrelevant when compared to the new Infernal Hordes activity in Season 5. Infernal Hordes is a wave-based activity where you pick modifiers between waves to change up the challenge and drop more of an activity-specific currency. At the end of the waves, you fight 3 big bosses and spend your currency between a few different options, one of which is a chest that drops a bunch of different resources, including masterwork materials. On top of the Pit and Infernal Hordes, there are Nightmare Dungeons, where you upgrade your glyphs, in-game bosses you farm for uniques and mythic uniques, and the big bad, Gated Health Bar of Lilith, a ghost of the story final boss that forces you to run in circles for 2 minutes in exchange for an item you can use to craft a mythic unique, but that only drops once per season. The in-game bosses are a good idea, but each run requires materials you get via drops in certain events, and the rate at which they drop kind of makes them feel like an unrewarding grind at times. Then again, the chance of dropping a mythic unique is debatably worth it. Unique items drop in the world and from specific in-game bosses, and they usually add a whole new dimension to the way you play. They're fun to get, and while the variance in their stat lines might be frustrating, they do give another aspect for the player to chase in their search for build perfection. Mythic uniques bring even more significant changes to your build, but are much rarer drops. These are the rarest items in the game and have the highest chance to drop from tormented bosses, which are in-game bosses you pay 3 times the materials to fight and then drop 5 times the loot. Getting even one of these can feel like a massive boost in power. It's just a shame there isn't anything above a tormented boss in the game's difficulty. This can sometimes make the acquisition of these superpowered items feel underwhelming. On the bright side, though, beginning in Season 5, players can equip these on their alts from level 35. It makes the leveling process quite a bit of fun, if a little samey between characters. Equip enough mythic uniques, and there's really no need for builds until the endgame. Despite some flaws in the game's systems, it's such a fun game to play, and it feels like it's respecting your time. At launch, depending on how optimally or suboptimally you played, you could play for 4 hours on your level 90 character and not gain a single level or make any meaningful progress. In its current state, it feels like you make some form of progress in every hour of Diablo 4, no matter where your character is in their build journey. I feel like there's still quite a lot I could say about it, but in the interest of wrapping this up, I rate Diablo 4's gameplay a perfectly seasoned sirloin steak burger that is dry and way overcooked. Bonus category, monetization. Microtransactions, bad. Okay, now that that's out of the way, Diablo 4's monetization is a little wonky. Skins cost up to like $40, which doesn't seem worth it. Some people complain about the shop being obtrusive, but that hasn't really been my experience. The battle pass doesn't seem the least bit worth it, but there doesn't seem to be anything that's pay to win. Doesn't really bother me. I rate monetization The cheddar crisp course I had at this one Michelin star French restaurant, that was actually just an expensive and glorified Cheez-It, and it wasn't as good as a Cheez-It. This is the part in normal reviews where you're expecting the shoe to drop at like a 5.5 out of 10 because the reviewer has spent most of the review talking about how average the game is. And then it's another 8 out of 10. There's none of that here at Bumpkus Bites, though, because we only tell the absolute and objective truth. And so I bring together our ingredients. Ah, yes, these different elements. The pointless compote garnish, the fake cheese product, the sort of bland but also sort of delicious bun, the infuriating onion ring, the dried out steak burger, and the snob's Cheez-It. Together, these make Diablo IV. I've got it. One of those Nashville hot chicken sandwiches that are sometimes delicious and sometimes utterly bland, that kind of appeared seemingly out of nowhere 10 years ago in every restaurant regardless of whether or not they ever served chicken before, but which actually came from a couple mom and pop restaurants in now egregiously gentrified Nashville neighborhoods. And this has been a Bumpkus Bites review, the only accurate and objective reviews on the internet and your absolute source of true opinions. Please join me next time for my review of probably Space Marine 2 or Firewatch or neither. We'll see. Let me know what you thought of this verdict in the comments below. You can't disagree, but you can support me and you could validate how accurate my reviews are and how true everything I say is. If you heard someone else say something to the contrary, you can comment that below so that we can all laugh at it. That would be cool. So, thanks.